Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are seeing us. It is a pleasure to have a conversation with all of you today. I'm truly, truly excited. And this conversation is a bit about It Ends With Us, which, as you know, has become a cultural phenomenon. And for those of you that might have not heard about it, this is a bestseller book by Colleen Hoover, and we're very excited to be talking about it and to have been the charitable partner with Wayfarer Studios on this project. We have supported it now, I would say, over 2 years, from scripts to talking to actors, and it's been a great journey. We are so excited with the film, and we're excited that everybody will get a chance to see it now. So I want to pass now to Jane, who will introduce the panel, and we'll get going.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. I am thrilled to have such an esteemed group of women with us for what we are intending to be a free-flowing conversation amongst a bunch of friends. Let me introduce who my friends are. First, I have Tommy Vincent, who is an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and leader in the movement to end domestic violence, including the immediate past chair of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Hey, Tommy.
Hey.
We have Rocio Molina, senior legal partner at Valor US, California's sexual assault coalition, and she works to provide legal counsel, research, technical assistance, and training to support immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. And finally, last but not least, Leslie Morgan-Steiner, an incredible author of Crazy Love and the presenter of one of the most viewed TED Talks on domestic violence. And I will tell you, Leslie, I watched it again just yesterday, and I was still blown away. And I know your story, and I know you. So I encourage everybody to take a look. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Pamela and sort of get our conversation going.
We are, always fascinated when a book and now the film grabs people's imagination in the way that that this one has. And I would like to talk a little bit about like your thoughts on it, but I also want to talk a little bit about, I think, one of the things that is being crucial to that process, which is love and people's understanding of love, and how much maybe we don't even talk about love in this sector in the way that I would love to. And Leslie, I remember seeing your work at the beginning and love the title of the book because of that. I think, after working 10 years, I'd never seen something written, like that, and Crazy Love. So yes, what do we think really has, caught everybody's imagination, and what is the role of love in all of this?
What a great opening question. Because we don't teach love in any society that I've ever come across, any community, any religion, any school. We don't teach what love is. And it's sort of like handing a young human the keys to a car and saying, you know what, you've seen me do it, you'll be fine. And it's not like that. And we really should teach love so that more people don't end up in crazy love, as I did as a young woman. And I'd say my key message on this now from, I'm almost 60 now, and I fell in love with my abuser when I was 22. And what I'd say from my perspective now is that one of the most dangerous things in our society, and you see it really clearly in Colleen Hoover's wonderful books about abuse, and in the movie too, is that we idealize and romanticize love from a woman's perspective. And we teach girls from a very early age that when they grow up, they're going to be a princess or a queen, and they need to wait for Prince Charming. And it's really dangerous and destructive for women and for men to have such an incredible focus on men fulfilling us and completing us. And I think that one of the things that I try to teach the younger women in my life is to invest in yourself first and foremost, and to have a love story with yourself, and to have love and romance be a piece of your life, but not your savior, not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, not the focus of your life.
What is it that we are missing, I guess, in that equation in terms of what we tell? And you see it in in the main character here, right? Like, she falls in love with a dream. And I guess we all do in a way.
And she resists and still falls in love because of the character, because of Ryle's charm. But Tommy, what are your thoughts? I'm curious.
When I think of the character of Lily Bloom, in her experience before she even fell in love with Ryle, she witnessed an experience and she did learn love how through the relationship with her mother and her father. And sometimes we don't take into consideration the experience of children and the environment and how they are learning how to love. Myself being a thriving survivor, I learned how to love at the age of 3 years old. No one was deliberately teaching me, but visually I saw what was taking place in the environment, and every relationship, well, not every relationship, but many of the relationships that were taking place around me involved some level of abuse. And we know that abuse is not just physical. There are many aspects that show up in abusive relationships. But for me, I thought about Lily and I thought about how love was like a coin, and the coin has value no matter what side the coin is on, whether it's heads or tails. And in this particular situation, watching her mother being abused, love showed up as physical abuse and it showed up as actual love, because an abuser doesn't abuse you all the time. There are the
Mhm.
aspects that you fell in love with, and that coin still holds value. And so she saw value in that relationship, but she learned how to define that value watching her mother being abused.
That's a really interesting question because in the book and in the film, one of the first scenes is sort of Lily trying to eulogize her father. She's being asked to eulogize her father, who, um, for lots of reasons, not the one you mentioned and others, she has a very complicated relationship with, and she she can't. And so in these childhood experiences, do we see that the love is bifurcated? Do you know what I mean? Between the mother and the father, or the abuser and the non-abuser, or is it? You know what I'm saying, Tommy? Based on what you just said.
Yeah, so I really believe that this is and I'm not minimalizing, you know, the experience of a child. I was that child. And I ended up in an abusive relationship. So I totally experienced the abuse secondhand, and then I experienced the abuse firsthand. And it wasn't that I said, oh, let me enter into this relationship. It was commonplace, it was normal. And no one, what I didn't learn was love that does not hurt intentionally. So, being in the relationship that I entered into, I really felt like it was par for the course. As a matter of fact, when I got married and my husband wasn't hurting me when we were dating, I thought he doesn't love me. Like there was a period in my relationship where I was struggling with him loving me purely and loving me kindly and was not harming me, because I really believe that love was in conjunction with harm.
I think that's one of the most dangerous things about abuse is that it's so confusing when love and abuse go together.
Mhm.
It's just a double whammy that is really hard to wrap your head around. And I think that what is so fascinating about abuse is that if you grow up with it, you think it's somehow normal and it's associated with love. But that if you grow up without any of it, you are naive and you think it's never going to happen to you. So it just goes to show that we're all vulnerable. All people are vulnerable
Mhm.
to abusive love. And it's why we need to talk about abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all the forms of abuse, family abuse, romantic abuse, so that we all understand it so we can recognize the pattern. Because when you're in an abusive relationship, what it feels like is incredibly personal. It feels really romantic. It feels intense. And it doesn't feel at all like it's a pattern and that it's happening to other people. And one of the most empowering things that happened to me is when I realized that I wasn't alone, that I was in incredibly good company because millions of people were being abused every day, just like me, and that I wasn't special and that the love wasn't special. And it gave me a pathway to get out.
I feel like Lily was carrying also this expectation of not being in an abusive relationship herself. Like that's what she wanted, right? And almost at every turn she finds herself trying not to believe that that could be her again, her mother. And I feel like there is thousands and thousands, millions of people out there feeling the same way because they've witnessed it, right? And I'm not sure about how much support or information is there for people who have witnessed domestic violence in terms of how they will form their relationships afterwards.
No one would argue that Ryle didn't love her, right? That was like, you can feel it. You can't say, when you're just searching for love and you think of it in a romantic way, that's the love that you dream of having. Is you can't argue that he didn't love her, but you do know that he was harmful for her. Mm-hmm. And you learn about all the different forms of love that exist, and maybe that but that's what makes it so hard. Maybe we'll talk about that right now, but why it makes it so hard to leave, because he did love her, and are you going to find that love again?
Right. The point I wanted to ask Tommy about was because I know that your husband Troy comes from an abusive home, and you all took sort of different paths, and what Pamela was just saying about Lily and really wanting not an abusive relationship, and sort of that was what she was looking for. It reminded me just a little bit of your story with Troy, at least in the beginning of your relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when Troy and I got together, neither one of us talked about the abusive relationships that we experienced. In my situation, I was in a physical and emotional abusive relationship, and my husband witnessed his mother being abused very severely throughout his childhood. And so we came into the relationship with our idea of what love was based off of what we had experienced. And he clearly did not believe love was what he witnessed with his mother. Where on the other hand, I believe that love entailed some type of abuse. And so I came into the relationship extremely aggressive, and felt some kind of way when he would walk away or he would shut down the conversation and take a beat, because I felt like he was not demonstrating how much he loved me because he wasn't fighting for me. And while that may sound twisted, it is very common for people to really walk in the space of the picture and the experiences and the feelings that are generated. And I think she talked about how intense the love can feel, and knowing that Ryle, it felt like love to Lily. All of it felt like love to Lily. And the piece where Pamela talked about how at every turn she was trying to convince herself it wasn't abuse, because who wants to admit, who wants to sit in a place of, I'm allowing this to happen to me? That's the piece of shame that survivors carry. And so to admit that this is taking place, and to acknowledge that this experience is anything other than love, it builds and adds on to the shame that you are experiencing as a survivor. And I had to learn in my relationship with my husband, Troy, and it wasn't until we started talking about it, which was years down the line, by the way, that we recognized that we had to learn how to love each other where love was not hurting intentionally. And we had to learn how to show up, and we had to learn how to disagree, and we had to develop healthy communication skills, because shutting down is not helpful. That's harmful in a relationship as well. And also being aggressive and throwing things and screaming and cussing is not helpful in the situation either.
Right. And that's interesting, because we talk about this a lot at No More, that, you're not taught love. People don't teach healthy relationships. They believe they model healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, and if all you know is violence, then that's your quote unquote healthy relationship. That's what it is. So we talk about healthy relationships a lot at No More, and trying to really focus on that.
And let me segue on these comments, really, following on Rocio's trail here about Ryle. Absolute charm. I think that's one of the magics of the book is that you, as a reader, fall in love with him. I will tell you that Justin will probably cause the same impact in the film. So, and I would love to just stop a little bit and talk about that charm that is hard for people. It's almost like we look at of abusive relationship at the end, and we can't just sit down a little bit at the beginning. I mean, some abusers, your family loves them, or you feel sometimes they love you more than they love you.
You know, it is so amazing that I love this question and talking about charm, because I think if you haven't been in an abusive relationship, you think one of the myths that you fall for is that we victims are kind of, we're naive or we're stupid or we don't see it, as if abusers come with a sign on their forehead that say, I'm an abuser, watch out. But they don't. And the charm, it's not surface charm. It's not that somebody's like a glib salesperson. It is, they show up as our true fairy tale. And my abusive husband, he was easily the funniest, smartest, most handsome, most caring man I'd ever known. And he made me feel like he could see inside my soul in a way that I tell you, no woman on earth could not have fallen for this. And I had just graduated from Harvard. I knew my way around the world. You know, I had a great job at 17 magazine. I had this really bright, promising future. And here comes this Ivy League educated Wall Street trader, so much like Ryle. And I just fell in love like falling off a cliff. It was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And for somebody from the outside to say, you know, watch out, you're in trouble, this is danger. There's no way I could have heard that or listened to that. And it's one reason why I think it's really hard to help people at the beginning of the relationship, because love feels so good. It was like, you know, you guys, it was like heroin, even though I've never had heroin. I just felt like this is my fantasy come true, and I am the luckiest woman on earth that this man loves me. So much like Lily Bloom. And, you know, eventually we've got to talk about Atlas in this too, the homeless boy who she helps and who is also so handsome and incredibly charming in his own very different way. Because I think that's trouble too. And I think one of the things that I learned from another abuse survivor is that something you have to really watch out for in any kind of abusive relationship is if you feel pity for the person. Pity is so seductive and it feels so much like love. And it's the biggest red flag of all. And when I look at Ryle and Atlas, I feel Lily's big heart and how she feels in her own way pity for both of them, and how pity makes her feel really strong and safe. Like she can save them, like she's the one in control. And she also feels pity for her father too, which is a red flag as well. That's what makes this all abusive love so incredibly complicated and confusing, is that it's kind of 10 different emotions coming at you at once. And most abuse victims fall in love with their abusers between the ages of 16 and 24. It's the most dangerous time in a woman's life when it comes to abuse. And I think it's because it's so overwhelming when you have all these facets of love hitting you at one time. And I'm really curious what everybody else's perspective is on this. Tommy, you were so eloquent about how you responded with aggression towards love. And I've never heard somebody say that before. And it is so true. And we think the aggressiveness is going to protect us, right? But it doesn't necessarily. Sometimes that kind of reaction it's a landmine in its own way. And how do you deal with that in yourself, where you think you're able to protect yourself the way Lily was, by being suspicious and cautious and knowing that she came from an abusive family, so she had to watch out, but it didn't save her.
When I was in my abusive relationship, there was a point in the relationship where I was experiencing abuse, physical abuse. And I would always just cower down and assume a position to protect myself. And then at some point in the relationship, I started fighting back. And in fighting back, there was a sense of power for me in that situation, which was harmful moving forward, because I felt like this is how, I'm in this relationship. He's hitting me, I'm hitting him, but look, I'm protecting myself. And somehow that rationalized in my mind as this is making this relationship acceptable. Now, moving beyond that relationship, when Troy and I entered into our relationship, my aggression towards him wasn't because I was trying to protect myself. My aggression towards him was because I believed that that was part of what love looked like. So I was just mimicking the behavior from the abusive relationship I was in, as well as the relationships that I witnessed growing up where there was a presence of abuse. And so for me, it was par for the course. There was no love if there was no shouting, if there was no, elements of aggression in the relationship, because that fight equated to part of he really, really loves me.
I think that that is just so true. And I think that the abusive partners feel that as well. It's one reason why they're so explosive and volatile, is that they see it as love as well. And my ex-husband, he had 3 guns. He strangled me all the time. And, we're talking about, we're 2 Ivy League professionals who looked so normal on the outside. And behind closed doors, we've got this crazy love relationship, which is why it's the title of the book. And I think that my ex, he grew up with horrific childhood abuse. He was a victim too. And I think he pushed me because he thought also as well that if we had this volatility and this violence, it meant that we really loved each other. And it also meant that I was never going to leave him, which was the most important thing in his life, was that I not abandon him the way other women had abandoned him. And for a long time, it was the most important thing to me too. I was going to be that hero woman, that really strong woman who protected him, who showed him what true love was all about, and who healed him. And it made me feel so big and powerful and strong that I was going to heal a man. And it wasn't until really the final beating where he came close to killing me many times, but the last beating when we were both at Wharton Business School getting our MBAs, and he came incredibly close to killing me, so much so that a neighbor pounded on our door and tried to break down our door. The police were called. It was a horrific thing. And that's when I realized, you know what? It's him or me. And I had that moment where I thought, I've got to choose me. As much as I love him, I have to choose me. And, I think that another thing that both everybody on this panel is talking about is when we reach that moment where we realize we can't heal another person. And we've got to really begin the journey of taking care of ourselves and healing ourselves. And it is a long journey. This doesn't happen overnight. Leaving is just the beginning.
I want to talk a little bit about friends and family and Elisa at this point as a character in the story, and her, in a way, defiance of like standing, by her friend. What are your thoughts on the character, but on things that we can tell people really on how to support, people close to us?
That's really a good question, because in the character, Alyssa was the sister of Ryle, the abuser, the person that was hurting the main character, Bloom. But she also recognized that behavior was abuse, that knew that it was dangerous, that saw her also as a woman, right? She was able to separate, I'm your sister, I'm your relative, I'm going to be here for my brother because blood is thicker than water. But she also recognized the woman in her and wanted to support her and be there for her. So I thought that was really great in the book, that they were able to show the complexity that you feel when you have that. And I think she was very fortunate to have her there, because a lot of survivors, going back to the charm, that charm is can be very isolating too, right? What gets you there, what gets you to fall in love and the fire and everything, but it's also what can be isolating because everybody loves this person, and you feel like you're going to lose people because you need to be safe and you leave them, and sometimes it's a tool to isolate you. But Alyssa, what didn't isolate with her, she stayed with her, and it's good to be there. And it's hard to tell somebody to get out, like Leslie was saying in the beginning. So it's really good to just be there for somebody, give them options, listen to them, and continue to be there in their life. Maybe you can't, they're not going to leave. Maybe that's not the right thing for them, but you're there to let them know they're not alone.
I think one of the hardest positions is when you're the family or friends or coworkers of an abuse victim and you realize they're being abused, or something is wrong, because you don't have the denial and that sort of love magic. And you can see really clearly that they're in danger, and if that they have children, that the children are in danger too. And it's so difficult to know what to do. And what I say to people is try so hard not to get angry at the victim, because that's what the abuser wants. Is the abuser wants to isolate the victim and keep the victim isolated. Because it's so hard to help somebody if they're isolated. And isolation comes in geographic, financial, psychological, all different forms. But what helped me the most is that I had two friends, a lot like Lily. I had two people who somehow were clear-eyed about the abuse and knew what to do. One was my best friend from college, who's a big-hearted pediatrician, and the other, believe it or not, was my abuser's best friend. And he must have grown up in an abusive home or something, because he saw what was going on and he loved both of us. And he tried to help both of us by very gently confronting us. And both my friend and my abusive husband's best friend stayed close to us, which is the number one thing you can do to help somebody, but it's really hard and really painful. And they also, without telling me I had to leave or trying to rescue me, both of those friends held up a mirror to my life, and it broke through my denial. They both very gently in their own ways said, Leslie, I'm scared. I'm worried. I'm concerned. Something's not right. And I'm your friend, and I love you, and I'm always going to be here for you. And I need you to know that I think there's something wrong in this relationship, and you've changed. And that's all that it took. And it took me a couple of years after both of those friends confronted me before I was able to leave. But those were the two people that I turned to the most when I needed to leave, along with my immediate family. And some of my immediate family was able to be there. But believe it or not, some of my immediate family, including my own father, took my abusive husband's side, because they're part of it too. The family and the friends, they get trapped in this crazy love as well. And you think that when you tell people about the abuse and you say, I'm leaving, the sun's going to come out and everybody's going to come to your aid and help you. And it's not always quite that simple. The complexity of abuse continues even after you've left. And this is not something that we're going to get into today because it's not part of Colleen Hoover's books, but something really, really important is family court, and how family court judges don't know much about abuse, and they often award custody to the abuser. And there's this whole aftermath that is really complex for victims that is an important part of the reality of the abuse story. And the fact that Lily has a child with Ryle is a really, really important part of her story, because in so many ways, having children with your abuser can be another challenge. And I'm sorry to say it, but in so many ways, a life sentence, because our society doesn't understand how complex abuse is. And we have this mythology that any father is a good father, and an abusive father is really dangerous and to children and to their ex, and it perpetuates the cycle of abuse to allow abusers unfettered access to their children and to their exes.
Elisa, she has a very powerful line in the movie that every survivor, every victim of intimate partner violence needs to know, and that none of this is your fault. That's what she said to Lily. And oftentimes, as a survivor, you sit and you think about what it is that you're doing that could stop the abuse. If I say something in a different tone, if I, you're trying to identify what the triggers are to prevent yourself from being abused. And that line is so powerful because there's absolutely nothing you can do because it's not your fault. As a survivor, when you get to that place where you are able to really believe that, it allows for you to release the burden of the shame, to release the burden of the action that you could take to stop the person from abusing you. So I really appreciated that line in the movie.
I agree. I think it was really one of the things we'll talk about in a little bit is about the sort of cultural moment that we're facing. And that's a big piece of it right there.
It's one of the most touching kind of moments. I Going a little bit back to Atlas. I think one of the things that let's say concerned me. Of course, he's our say hero character in a way, but it's like the different ways in which abuse affects somebody in their adult life, right? It seems, and it's kind of clear through the story that it was really hard for him to actually, make himself up and almost waiting for a relationship, for a special moment he had had in his childhood, right? And it was a continuous wait for somebody who at moments wasn't even available.
I was worried for Atlas that he could become a victim himself because of his childhood and because of his vulnerability and because of his idealization of love as a healing power. And I think the way that we look at love, that love is like a potion and something so powerful and so magical that it heals us, makes everybody really vulnerable. And men can be abuse victims too, to physical abuse, to emotional abuse. And so that was something that was really compelling to me about Atlas, is that, I said earlier that pity is a red flag, but I felt sort of sorry for Atlas. Like I was worried about him as well. Which goes again to show how complex abuse is and how important it is to have discussions like this.
I thought it was really interesting that his name is Atlas, and he's literally holding the world on his shoulders. So I thought that was a really, way here to the author here that it was very symbolic throughout, that she was finding strength through him, through their memories, and what it means for her future.
When you just look at Atlas and the other characters in the movie, if we take that and put it into real life, everyone comes to the table with their own story. We all have our own history that brings us to the moment we are in today. And Leslie talked about healing and the need for us to make sure that and I'm adding to what she said, but the need to really make sure that we take time to heal ourselves. And while we can't control how other people show up and love us, we do have the power to decide how we're going to love ourselves. And so in the moment, if we could rework the story and Atlas had an opportunity to get to this place where he wasn't allowing his life's experience as a young person to become the veil in which he looked through life, he would have positioned himself differently in his approach to, engaging with Lily. But because there was that moment in time where Lily was his savior. And so to really know that this woman did something for me at a time when I, didn't have, or the experiences I had were so horrific for my own self, it's not a wonder why he would see her the way that he was seeing her. But as people living in the world and looking to engage with other people and have healthy relationships, we owe it to ourselves to learn how to love ourselves. So when we show up and we engage with other people and receive their love, we've done such a great job at loving ourselves that we won't accept the counterfeit love that harms us in ways that damage us for a lifetime.
I think that is so, it's beautiful and it's profoundly true. And if I could communicate one thing to every fan of It Ends With Us is start and stay with the journey of loving yourself. And I think when I was in my 20s, I had this idea that loving myself was presenting a beautiful facade to the world. And I couldn't have been more wrong, because loving yourself is really being your own best friend and taking your own side in every argument and backing yourself up and saying, I'm going to be here for you no matter what happens. And Tommy, I think that you're really right, that there are no guarantees in life. There's no guarantee that you're going to find the right partner, that partner is going to be able to be there for you forever, that they're going to be loyal and true and Prince Charming. And the only guarantee I think that we have is that we can be there for ourselves, no matter what life throws at us. And that is I think the journey that Lily Bloom is on in this movie, is through her life experiences and starting her own business and loving these two very different men and eulogizing her father and taking a look at her mother and becoming a mother herself. She is doing that painstaking work of figuring herself out and figuring out how to be there for herself no matter what. And I think we don't talk about that enough in terms of what love really is. We started this discussion about what is love, and it's not finding yourself in the eyes of another human being. It is finding yourself in your own mirror. And that's what it's all about. And that gives people so much strength, and the strength to deal with any kind of challenge that life throws you.
Before I bring a special guest, I really want to just talk a little bit about, this is something I used to work in shelters, and it was really hard when a woman came to the door of the shelter to tell her that one day she was going to leave and that one day things were going to be better. Like, that end of the tunnel, right? That, not only the moment that you make the decision, but how you start growing up after that healing up process afterwards. And obviously, that is a journey that Lily will embark in, at the end. And so I really want to get your thoughts about that kind of really positive message of, what is that end of the tunnel? What does it look like for anybody who is seeing this, who is currently in an abusive situation?
That is such a great point. I remember when I left my abusive ex-husband, and I was a student at Wharton Business School, and my ex-husband was a student there too, and he's the one who told everybody what he'd been doing to me. So all of my students knew, the professors knew, recruiters knew, and I had an older marketing professor take me aside and whisper to me. She said, "I went through the same thing, and one day this is going to feel like a nightmare that happened to somebody else." And I clung to those words. And it's what I say to survivors now too. When they walk through the doors of the shelter, when they email me or call me or I speak and they come up to me, I say, "You're stronger than you think. You're not alone. And one day this is going to feel like a nightmare that happened to somebody else." And for me, my journey to healing was writing Crazy Love, which took 10 years to write, and then doing my TED Talk and working so hard on that and just coming out and telling my story again and again. That's the healing that I got. Everybody's healing is a little bit different, but what I will tell you is don't be dismayed that it takes so long to leave. Don't give up that it takes so long to heal, because it's a journey. It's not something that happens overnight. And it doesn't happen in the 90-minute span of a movie or the day or two that it takes to read a book about abuse. It takes a long, long time. And don't ever give up on yourself, because it's a beautiful journey to learning how to love yourself and how to love other people and to model this kind of true, genuine love.
That's what makes it really a good message, hear the hope. And I'm glad that it's there in the, in the movies for young people to say, like you said, Pamela, for them to see that there is hope at the end. It wasn't easy. There's a lot of things that hold you back and it's very complex, but at the end of this, there is that hope.
The first step of moving away from and towards your bright future is just the beginning. But I also want to be very mindful that that first step may result in stepping back, because we know it takes several times of I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave before the leave actually happens. So I just want them to take courage and not be discouraged in the process, because it takes so much courage just to recognize where you are, and that every step you take is a step forward, even when you take that step back, because you're on your way. You are on your way, and just keep going, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And there is countless other survivors. There are countless people working in the field who are rooting you on and who are available at any time to be encouragement, to provide resources. You are not alone in this process, and that the tunnel is short. And when I say that, I mean this. In the tunnel, you can't see all of the bright lights and everything that's available to you in the world. So it's those first few steps of getting out where you feel like you're encapsulated and that this will never end. But you'll get to a point where you start to see everything in front of you, this whole world that is available to you, so that you can really flourish in a life that you deserve, because you are worthy of love. And I don't want people to be afraid that they will not experience a healthy relationship. One bad relationship does not mean every relationship is going to be that way. But it is so critical that you do the healing work for yourself so that you can experience that healthy relationship in a healthy way.
Thank you all so much. It's a great conversation. And now I want to bring in our special guest, Justin Baldoni, actor, director, co-founder of Wayfarer Studios, and the man behind the movie It Ends With Us.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
Hi. It's so good to see you, Jane and Pamela, and such a honor to meet you three. This conversation, I've been so grateful to just be in the background listening, and I've been writing things down furiously. Um, uh, it's wow. I
Well,
thank you all so much for doing this, and I just feel like I've just learned so much.
we are interested to know what motivated you to take on the adaptation of It Ends With Us, and also sort of in there, your approach to the portrayal of domestic violence in the film. Because, just as a small aside, No More has worked with Wayfarer Studios and Justin to help ensure that those scenes and those situations are portrayed in the most accurate way as possible, and that's not always the case. So that's something that's you reaching out and wanting to learn more. So I sort of want to marry those two. What motivated you to take it on, and
Hmm.
what made you take that approach?
It's a great question. So I don't think there was any one thing. I think there was a bunch of things. One of them was, I was a few years into my work with masculinity at this point, and I had already I had done the TED Talk and started the process of what Man Enough has now become, and I was really doing a lot of work on myself, and I was in the presence of greatness. You, Tony Porter, Jackson Katz, learning so much from all of you all. And when Johanna, my book agent, sent me the book originally because we were looking for projects that could actually make a difference in the lives of an audience member, and we were building my studio around, really making art and content that could ignite a spark in somebody, that could maybe help them change their perspective or make a different choice in their life. Because I believe art has that power. When she sent me this book, I had no idea what to expect. And then I read it thinking it was just going to be kind of like a cheesy romance novel or just having no clue. And I was captivated. I was mortified. I found myself in moments judging situations, not understanding, and then just sobbing by the end. My daughter, I think, was 4 at the time, and then the choice that Lily makes at the end, I felt I resonated with it, and I didn't have any direct connection to her situation, and I just found it so human and so universal, and directly also related to my work with men. So I just, and because it moved me so much, it was almost an instantaneous, like, oh, we have to do this. I have to do this. And that's kind of the barometer by which, like, I kind of measure everything. Like, if it touches my heart and if it moves me and it makes me want to, like, get up and advocate for something or somebody or a group of people, then it's a project that I would love us to in some way try to be a part of. And being very honest, and it's a bit embarrassing to say this, but as I was reading the book, there were moments when I, as a man, was unable to understand why she would stay with him. I think that was what I thought the book did so well, is it made me question it, and it made me frustrated at times, which is what survivors experience on a day-to-day basis. I didn't have that personal experience, and I shouldn't have had to, and yet my privilege afforded me the ability to kind of judge and just think that, oh, well, if I was in that situation, I would leave. Little did I know I had been in a very similar situation. Right. And that was also, I think, part of the judgment, which now I understand. You're always, it's like how we get triggered by our own family members in some way because they're so much like us. I didn't realize that there were parts of me that were very similar to Lily, and that I had been in, not similar, but an adjacent situation. So I got very impassioned by it, and then Colleen, before we had closed the deal on optioning the book, had emailed me and asked if I had thought about acting in the movie, because at the time I was co-starring in Jane the Virgin and playing a very different character, and she had suggested in the email that I consider Ryle, which I couldn't even comprehend. That was just too much for me, and yet there was a part of me that wondered if I could. That kind of began this journey that has taken 5 years to get here. And then, in answer to your second question, Jane, there were times over the development of this movie where I grappled with the idea of both directing and acting in it. Mm-hmm. And I think even at some point I had conversations with you guys about this. For one, I wasn't sure if I should direct this as a man. I wasn't sure if a woman should direct this. And number two, I wasn't sure if I should play Ryle because I didn't know if I could. The consensus was that I should absolutely take it on. And in some ways, because of the work that I was doing as a man and working on myself and the platform that I have with masculinity, as you both told me, Pamela and Jane, that in some ways I was the right person to play Ryle because we wanted that charm and that sweetness to also be a part of that character, because it would help people also understand that this was real love. So it's kind of reluctantly it took 5 years, but probably 2.5 years in, I said, okay, I have to direct this movie. I really see it. And then shortly after that was when I decided that I was officially going to play Ryle and see if I could find a way to bring myself to experience his darkness and to do these things that are absolutely unforgivable and not go crazy myself and destroy myself in the process. And the final thing was, once I finally signed on and was like, okay, I'm going to direct this movie, it was with the understanding that the only way it would be possible is if we were to partner with Jane and Pamela and no more. Because I reached out. I remember, Jane, I saw you at that event and I said, I really need help. I'm about to do this thing and I don't know if I can do it.
Right.
And I want this to be truthful, and I think this has the ability to genuinely save lives. I mean, in our movie business, there's always this joke of like, come on, we're not saving lives. And at Wayfarer, I want to do it different. I was like, well,
Right.
what if we can? What if we could? And that was the other reason I was so drawn to this book, is because I knew it had genuinely helped and saved lives. And what if this had the potential as a film to help a Lily have the strength to leave the situation she's in? And further, what if it had the ability to help a potential Ryle see his behavior and he doesn't want to become that? He doesn't want to go down that path. And maybe he had a similar trauma and there are microaggressions and he has issues with anger, and he's like, whoa, this could be me and I could lose everything that I love. Like, what if we could do that with a film? And the only way that would be possible is if I had the support of people that are working in this sector, that work every day with survivors. And I was so grateful that like Jane and I had gotten to become acquaintances and friends through our mutual network. And it was just like a gift from God that we were in the same place at the same time. And I was just like, please, can you help? I might do this thing. And it was a resounding yes. This would be beautiful. And then it's turned into a beautiful partnership, across the studio.
Justin, I want to kind of ask something, because after so many conversations, I saw firsthand, that preparation for the Ryle character and how hard it was, and wow, how you wanted to ensure that portrayal was done in such a way. I want to ask you, maybe I never asked this question, which is funny now that I think it, is what do you want people to take from it?
At its core, this is not a movie about domestic violence. It's a movie about love
Mm-hmm.
and the choices that we make.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, and it's going to make me emotional, that as I was making this movie, I was imagining one woman, whoever that person is. And I was imagining her in the theater with a group of her girlfriends. And these girlfriends brought her to that theater. Leslie, similar to the way your friends gently guided you. And I imagine the lights coming up and her crying and realizing the situation she's in and making a choice to not go home. So I can't lead with that. But the reality and the intention over the last 5 years has very much been about her. And that's my metric for success. And I believe that can happen. And I look forward to the day when I get an email or read a comment that person decided not to go back to the situation. It would make it all worth it.
And I can reassure you that will happen. People will see love. People will learn. Many people who might not know about the issue will learn. This will be a discussion. It'll make them think. There'll be somebody who will analyze their situation. And that might be also for somebody who might make a decision, at that moment. So, and we know that. And the reason we know that, everybody in this panel, is because we've seen that miracle in prevention work. Yeah. We've seen that, we put out there a lot of energy, and we just, don't know sometimes who it will come to. And then all of a sudden, I'm sure the three of you, have received emails or letters saying, that moment, that conversation, that changed my life. So yes, that is special.
For the panelists, I have a question for you and relates to Justin, which is that, this is a big cultural media moment for domestic and sexual violence, even though that is not what the movie is about, because it is portrayed with such care. And because there may be that woman who sees herself or sees a friend or a family member, how do you think the field, and please bring Justin into it if you can and should or will they take advantage of this moment?
Both domestic violence and sexual assault are highly gendered crimes, where the victims are mostly women and the perpetrators are mostly men. And one of the frustrations for the last 15 years that I've been doing this work for me is that both of these crimes are considered women's issues. And the responsibility and burden for ending sexual assault and domestic violence is put on women. And we can never end this if we don't bring men into the conversation and the solution. And it's why I respect your work, Justin. It's why I love Tony Porter and Jackson Katz so much, David Adams, the handful of men, Evan Stark, who just died, who have really worked on this. And I see this movie as an opportunity to bring in men and get men to look at themselves through Atlas, through Ryle, through Lily's father, through those really strong, interesting male characters. And so my question for you, Justin, is in the work that you do and also as an actor and just in all of this movie, what can we do? What can men do to make sure that men feel empowered to own this issue too, without shame and without cringiness? What do you think? How can all of us make sure that men get involved in this issue and that it's not a women's issue, that it's a human issue?
That's the $1 billion question. I remember having a conversation with my wife and then talking about this in an interview right after Sarah Edwards was murdered in England. And I found it baffling that a young woman was murdered and the response to the murder was to instill a curfew on all of the women. And I remember it, I was so confused. I had a genuine moment of like not understanding why they wouldn't put the curfew on the men. So not only so the woman was raped and murdered, and now all women have to be punished and stay inside so the men can be free. And that's the perfect example of, we know from Jackson and Tony and all of this work, like why this is not a women's issue. This must become a men's issue. And it must become an issue of prevention versus us putting the Band-Aid on over and over and over and over again. But I unfortunately believe this starts much earlier. This starts with our young boys. So there is no Band-Aid. There is no magic wand. It's getting to our young boys. And I believe the way we do that is by getting to men who are fathers. And it's a generational thing, I think, that we'll start to see a difference of, because I think generationally, I know that, I'm a millennial, our kids are being raised differently. Our boys are being raised differently. Like it starts with, okay, that's your body and that's his body and that's her body. And we have to have permission before we do that. And then the other thing that is really tricky right now is that, as much as I disagree with it, and I have to do my best to understand it, men are in this place of right or wrong feeling like they're under attack. And one of the common things that I'm seeing is this feeling that they can't win, that they can't do anything right. They're lonely, they're upset, and all the problems in the world are the faults of men. And what I gather from that is that what they're not understanding is that the same system that is hurting women, that is allowing there to be a culture of domestic violence and sexual abuse, is the very same system that is causing them so much pain and making them feel like they can't win. Because until men are safe places for themselves, as you all know firsthand, the world will never be a safe place for anybody.
Justin, I think you illustrated in your comments just then on how it's a both and situation, because we're talking about identifying ways to have solutions where we're holding space for women who are experiencing the abuse, or women in general just being able to have this place of vulnerability. And in addition to that, in order for men to be able to come to the place where they're a part of the conversation and willing participants and being a part of the solution, we're also asking them to be vulnerable. The challenge today is that if someone was to sit before us and share the heinous things they've done or the experiences in which they were culpable for the behavior that was projected onto a woman, he may not be received well. And it could cost him literally everything. And so we have this challenge in society with being able to move forward and give grace in a place where people can put this forward so that he can get help, she can get help. Because in the story, we have Ryle and we have Lily. Lily has her experience, which kind of directed and led her on the path that she was on, and also Ryle. And everybody has a story in life. Everybody has an experience in which they have encountered some level of trauma, whether that's abuse or not, some level of something that molds and shapes them into the human being that they become as adults. So creating space for people to be able to heal so we can get to this place of solution is so critical.
Yes,
That was that's a statement. But I do have a question in regards to the production of the film itself, and knowing that you had a whole set of people that were involved in the production, and you talked about your experience and how challenging it was for you to show up in your character as Ryle because of some of the ways that you had to move. Well, when you were doing those things where there was evidence of abuse, and you have set members, your crew and your cast and everyone involved in making the film that could be triggered in the process because of their own personal experiences, how did you all take care of each other on the set to ensure everybody was safe in the process?
That's a great question, Tommy. And I want to do a yes and for your first statement, which is exactly, it couldn't be more spot on. The only other thing that I would add is that because of where we are right now and the sensitive nature that I'm seeing between a lack of feeling safe for both women and men, and the importance of women being with women and men being with men, I think that the solution for now is that men have to do their own work with men. I don't feel that this is the time or the place yet where a man can go into a group where there are women and talk about these things, as you said. I don't think a man will feel safe to do that, even if he does want to be better. That said, I believe men have the ability to do that for each other. And some of the most spiritual moments of my life have been in groups of men where there is genuine accountability, where we only want what's best for that man, and he can bring his pain. He can bring the terrible things that he's done. They've created the environment to be vulnerable, which, by the way, at some point, my wife and I talk about this because she works with women and I work with men. At some point, my prayer is that women can, as flies on the wall, experience the beauty and the power of men holding themselves accountable and being vulnerable with each other. In response to your second question, Tommy, from the very beginning on set, my opening speech, I was very clear with the whole crew what this movie was about and who we were making it for. Number one. And if anyone felt a certain way, we had an intimacy coordinator on set, we had a stunt coordinator on set, and to please, talk with our producers if you needed a day off, or if something didn't feel right, or like there was space. I do wish I would have had on those days maybe a psychologist on set, so that in the event someone didn't feel comfortable going to a producer, they could have just walked over and gone to and talked to the psychologist. I do believe at one point we said if anybody felt like they needed to talk to somebody, I think we offered, to pay for their therapy session, their personal private therapy session. We wanted to make it nuanced and complicated as this topic actually is. And even what I've learned today, as much research as I've done, hearing you all talk, I mean, it's even more complicated than I knew going to set and make the movie. And Leslie, I just want to say it. Yours was one of the TED Talks I watched before I made the movie, and as I was doing the research, and it really helped me inform the script process. And as we were creating this character of Lily, so much of your story I tried to, in some ways, infuse into the movie. And I just wanted you to know that it was very important for me and inspiring for me, and helped me along the way, because I wanted Lily to, in some ways, be a representation of the brilliant, strong, powerful woman that you are. And if that could happen to you, someone like you, and that could happen to Lily, then that can happen to anybody.
Let me just say quickly, thank you, Justin. Really appreciate that a lot. And
Thank you.
So many victims are so strong, and it's great to see a victim and survivor portrayed as a strong, nuanced woman. So thank you. And thanks for this discussion. It was great.
I just really wanted to applaud you for working with us because you can't, I could tell that you've done the work as you said, but that you're consulting and bringing us into this because it's a solution that, like you said, bringing man, woman together, but everyone together. And in the movie where it says about the pattern, we either break the pattern or the pattern breaks us. Yeah. And it's not right? Because the survivor is not in the movie alone. There's hope. We're here to support them. And it's a solution that comes in the we. It's all of us. So I really applaud you for working with bringing us into this work and being very thoughtful and deliberate about it, the way you do it.
Well, I'm just grateful that Jane and Pamela said yes and guided me. And I assure you all, there were many, many notes. This was not oh yeah, it's great. This was like, oh, we have some work to do. Let's take this out. Let's change this. This might be interpreted wrong. Even down to the language in the hospital when the doctor asks Lily if she wants the test. Very, very specific details, and just always making sure that survivors were first and foremost present. And that would have been impossible without you both and without No More. And I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, and I really hope I can talk to each of you individually at some point. And, I wrote down so much of what you all said. Tommy, your story is incredible. And like, I felt empowered, it's just, you're clearly a motivational speaker. Anyways, I hope in some ways that we can continue our work together and that this can be something that you all use to reach more people.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for being in this conversation. It's been great. It's been great to kind of just grab, in this way, a book, a topic, a movie, and being able to dissect it in pieces and not just come with the maybe usual topic that we, talk about. So I think that conversation has been great. Justin, thank you so much. Thank you to the whole Wayfarer team. It's been a ride for us, and yes, there were so many reads of the script, and I have to say this to end. I must have seen dozens of versions of the script. So when at the point that I saw the movie, I thought, well, I've seen it, right? I've read it so many times. I couldn't imagine myself sobbing completely. So it was a journey. So I don't know if it was a journey, the movie, the emotion of it. But it's been a pleasure for No More to be part of the project. And we will carry on with this conversation and many others with different organizations. And we expect this kind of whole month of August to be able to be putting more information, materials for everybody who follows us on this issue. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Well, the work's just getting started, as Leslie said, right?
Indeed.
So
thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.